Hey everyone, and welcome to the studio. My name is Thomas, aka Tantum, and I'm today's tutor for the Production Music Life Melodic Techno Academy Volume 2 Start to Finish course. I will take you through my production from an empty Ableton file all the way from scratch to a finished track. We're going to go through sound design. Everything will be made from scratch. We're going to arrange the track. We're going to build drums, the whole deal. And this is what we are going to create today.
Sleepwalk to your house. If you leave me with a doubt, I would go the extra mile. I would give you all my time. Daydream, I dream.
Hello and welcome to the studio. My name is Thomas, aka Tantum, and I will be today's tutor for the PML Melodic Techno Academy Volume 2 Start to Finish course. We will start from scratch, meaning an empty Ableton file, and I will walk you through my production all the way, building the track, arranging it, sound design, all the way to a finished track you can play and send as a demo. And I hope you will learn something new. And without further ado, I would say let's dive into it. For this project, PML has provided me some samples to use. So what I did was I did a pre-selection of sounds I want to incorporate in this production. And the first thing I would like to start with, like usually, is the drums, because I like working from a strong foundation. For dance music, the drums are the centerpiece of the track, and that's why the first thing I will do is sort the samples, take a look at what we have, and set up a drum bus. So let's check the samples. We have some crash cymbal effect sounds. Those I will use later. And this one is a nice drum loop. Let's not forget to set up a utility on the master that will come in handy later, as well as a limiter, just so we're not peaking like this. Let's go down a couple of decibels just to be safe. All right, so we have one loop in already. Let's check what other sounds we have. Nice hi-hat loop, definitely gonna use that. I found this shaker, super nice. A snare. Another loop. Another snare, I will put it here for now. I want to check later which one I'm actually gonna use. More hi-hats, the same here. Drum, shaker, kick drum, definitely I will put into a MIDI channel immediately.
Daydream, I dream
and
of
a
you.
vocal. Some effect sounds. That should do it for now. Let's start with the kick drum. So I want to go for 125 BPM. That's a very usual tempo for this type of music. And I will keep things simple with a straight 4 to the floor groove. So let's solo the kick for now and loop this section. Perfect. Super snappy and punchy kick sample. Really like it. That's gonna be a joy to work with. Let's pull an EQ into this channel right away. And start working on the kick a bit. I'm gonna give it a high pass here, just to get rid of the low end distortion. Maybe enhance the snappiness a tiny bit. And I like to put my EQs into oversampling mode. Great. Now let's take a look at those samples. So when dragging samples in, sometimes if you don't check, they will be warped. What I like doing, because warping does distort the audio quality, and if there is no tonal element in a loop like this, I like to put it on repitch, because that way you preserve the high fidelity of the transients. So what I'm going to do now is just check all the loops if they have tonal information I want to use, and if not, I will put them into repitch mode. I have repitch here. Same here, no tonal information, so put it into repitch. Those sounds I will check on later, because it's one shots, I want to set them up in a simpler, but I just drag them in now to get an overview of the sounds. Does make quite a difference here, for example, the warping mode, but this still doesn't have a tonal information I want to use. So repitch mode it is. And let's maybe put them all into a group right away. Use a nice color. And that's our drums. So what I want to do is kind of build everything around the kick drum. So let me just boost the kick drum volume a tiny bit. And also I can immediately put a utility on this bus, make it a bit quieter, because as we are adding elements later down the line, sounds will sum up and I don't want to run into any peaking in the groups. So that's why I put a utility on here. All right. So for this loop, for example, I want to use an EQ, and you can immediately see there's some frequency cutoff happening. So let me just tame the top end. That way the steep fall off here doesn't seem as sharp. Putting the EQ into oversampling again. And I want to cut a bit of the lows away here. Like this. And maybe put it a bit quieter, because right now this sample is very loud and it's masking the kick. So a level like this would be more appropriate. Check. I want to sort the samples a bit. So this is kind of a shaker loop, so I want to put all the other shakerish drum loopy kind of sounds a bit closer together. Same thing here. Let's check the sound. I'll put an EQ with a bit of a low cut just to be safe on this loop, and so what you can see me doing here is I'm using the arrow keys up and down to dial in the volume. And one thing I like to do is to approach a mix like this similar to working on an analog console. So when leveling instruments on a console, what you do is one way to approach it is grab the fader and just move it up and down until you find the sweet spot. And I feel you can do that greatly with the up and down arrow keys in Ableton. So this, for example, would be too quiet. This would be too loud. I'm thinking somewhere here might be a nice spot. So we have those elements for now. Let's bring in the next one. This loop has a clap in it. So I'm maybe more interested in top end quality here. So let me pull up a compressor. And see how we can work out that snare clap sound that is in there. Because you already have some shakers in the high end. So one method you can do is to use a compressor, but not to duck the volume. If you use expand on a compressor, it will do the opposite. Once the threshold is passed, the volume will be boosted. And I want to use this mode to figure out if I can increase the presence of that snare/clap sound. And you can see now in this mode, the gain reduction is going upwards versus down, like in peak or RMS. Now it's really just about finding a sweet spot. Maybe increase the magnitude. So the attack and release on a compressor basically define how much inertia there is to the increasing or reduction of sound. And my goal here is to bring out the snare. So I want a fast attack, and the release, if it's a long release, it will be loud for a long time, which doesn't sound too good here. I think the default setting works quite nice. So now without the compressor, and with the compressor, we have a more snappy response on the sample, which is great. So let me pull up an EQ here and remove some of the low end, because this might increase or introduce distortion, especially in the low end. So getting rid of that. And I'm going for just a bit more of a boost around that clap frequency. So together, it sounds like this. Perfect. On to the next loop. Typical 909 kind of sound. It is a bit loud, so let's bring down the volume. And I like the texture of this sample, the 909-ish kind of hat, but I think the tail of the sound, the decay, is a bit too long. So what I want to do is cut the sample and use the fade tool to make it really snappy. Let's see how it sounds. For me, it's an improvement. Let's do a comparison. So it's a short, precise hat versus the more long, decaying hat. I think I prefer the short one. All right. Let's check an EQ here. And I'm just sweeping through the EQ bands to find the potential sweet spot of the sound. We have a lot of resonance down here, but also up here, which is kind of responsible for that typical 909-ish sound. So I want to bring that up a bit. This will be fine, but now the volume needs to be a bit lower. Perfect. Let's create some MIDI tracks here for the remaining samples, and let's see what we have. We'll start by maybe using that shaker here. And I am creating a new pattern. And I want to play around a bit to see if I find a rhythm that I like with this sample. Also, I'm noticing it has the sample itself has some attack to it, so I want to cut it shorter. Give it a tiny bit of fade in, and also I want to fade it out. This makes it more snappy, shorter, more precise. And that's kind of what I'm going for with these drums. in general, because it should be a peak time kind of melodic techno track, I think it helps if the foundation is very strong, precise, and the complexity we can introduce later through instruments and melodies. I think a straight offbeat hi-hat is totally fine for the sound. So for now I will leave it like that. Also something to do, rename those shaker. So we have an offbeat shaker. This was a clap loop, hi-hat loop, perk loop, and the kick. All right, awesome. So time to introduce another simpler here as well. So what sounds do we have? Snare, okay. Let's maybe start with this one. So since I didn't use the shaker as a rhythmic element, let's see if we can do something with this hi-hat sound. And mute this. This is a nice pattern. I'm playing around a bit with the velocity. So I quite like this pattern, and I think it introduces some momentum, some speed to the whole drums, because we are playing around the offbeat, and I'm still playing it on the offbeat, but with reduced velocity. Sounds great, but the volume is too loud. This sounds about right for me for now. Let's see, we had one more, this can go away. We had one more hi-hat sample. So let's drop it into simpler. And as you can see, we need to cut it because there's some silence in the beginning. And let's see. Sounds very sustained or decay again. So I'm going to shorten it. We need quite some reduction in level here too. Definitely helps to fill out the high end from the drums. Let's put an EQ on here for now. Great, we're already covering all the important frequencies. But for the clap loop, I want to create a new simpler track just to have one of those snare sounds to support it. Let's see what we have here. For now, I will just use one audio channel each to see which snare I like best. So let me loop this section here. I think this snare, it's great sound, but it has a bit too much body. So I will deactivate it for now. And I will go with this one. And let's see, maybe we don't need the simpler. Because on snare sounds, especially, or claps, it can sound nice if you shift them to the left or to the right, a tiny amount. So the transients from the kick and the clap don't overlap on the second beat here. So you can shift it forward or backward a bit. Helps a lot to clear up the transient. I think it doesn't have to be so much. This should maybe do. And also there's a lot of reverb in the sound. So again, I will use the fade to get rid of it. Sounds way better right off the bat. So we'll duplicate this and we can loop the whole section again. I'm introducing a compressor here because I want to check if we can further shape the transient. Similar to before, where we used the compressor to enhance the clap in one of the loops, my goal here is the other way around. I want to basically transient shape the sound. I want the transient to cut through more, similar to what I did with the fade, but I want to exaggerate this effect. So I'm using a compressor. And when I increase the attack here, you can hear the original transient comes through and then the volume will be reduced. So it makes the sound a tiny bit more snappier. Great. And let's follow up with an EQ. Generally, good advice would be to have an EQ after a compressor because the volume automation or the volume increase or deduction that's happening from the compressor will introduce artifacts. So I want to get rid of those. And also let's scan for potential sweet spots on the sound. I like it like this. So we already have a great foundation, but I want to increase the snappiness of the hi-hats. So what I will do is all the hi-hat containing elements I want to put into a group. So those two, the 909, the two other offbeat hi-hats. This one, let's call it groove hat. That's the snare. Great. On this bus, like I said, I want to increase the snappiness. What I have in mind and what I like doing is using an audio effect rack. And let's pull up maybe a compressor first. And using Command G, we have an audio effect rack, and I will immediately create another chain, but let's focus on this for now. That's one of my go-to setups for parallel processing, to have one chain affecting the sound and one original chain, and then you can blend it to taste. So the sound I have in mind should be a bit more pumpy because now it's very static. So let's create a sidechain to the kick here. Yeah, this is very extreme, of course. You can hear I need a bit more release, because if the release is very short, we don't get that pumping effect I'm looking for. Like this, we have a nice pumping sound. So let's follow up with a utility, because I want to exaggerate that. Using an LFO. And a shape like this, set it to 16th or 1/4. Right, like this. It's a bit loud now, sorry for that. But you can hear there's always a click on the crossover, so probably we're better off using a shaper. And what I want to do with that again is to have this pumping sound. We have it once from the sidechain now, but I want to put this over the whole sum. This, let's see, mapping. Yeah, way better. Because in Shaper you can have a downwards movement to save that click. Helps a lot. Now if I bring in the original again, this effect chain I've made now is pretty loud, so the volume has to come down for sure. But I also want to try out some distortion just on this effect chain. This sounds nice. The volume has to come up again. So this is just a really simple kind of trick to set up a parallel chain to make percussive sound punch more. I like doing this. This gives it more grit, more high-end excitement, and I quite like how it turned out. If I turn it on and off, so for now, we already have a great foundation to build upon, and I think it's also good to not be stuck in a loop for too long. So I want to move on right away to build a bass line. I think especially kick and bass, or the drums in general, and the bass have a strong relationship in electronic dance music, because that's where all the groove is coming from. And next up will be the bass. Alright, since we have basic drum groove sketched out, it's time to move on to the bass. So I will create a new MIDI track and I will immediately create a group for the bass. And as I did with the drums, we'll put a utility on there just to bring the levels down. And it's time to build a bass sound from scratch. For that, I want to use Serum. So we have an empty Serum patch and it's time to build a bass groove. So for this track, I already know which key I want to write it in, since when selecting the samples, I chose to work with a vocal, and the key will be F sharp. So let's open the piano roll. So what I like doing is to create a very simple groove to start with, and then elaborate on that. It's, in my opinion, easier to go from something simple to something complex than the other way around. So that's why we're in F sharp, and I just built like a very simple offbeat bass. And let's bring that octave down. Maybe already tweak the filter a bit. So now we have a basic, very basic bass sound. I also want to use an EQ on here for sure. So I want to just play around to see if I can get a groove that I like. And like I said, what I like doing is start from something very basic and then just play around to see what feels right. I like this groove. It's not too complex and it's very straightforward. Perfect for what I'm trying to aim for. Let's color this group, maybe a darker blue. Perfect. So now since I have the groove locked, it's time to work out the actual patch. And let's see what we have here. Using a bit of unison on the sound to give it some spread. Playing around with the waveform as well. Let's maybe set up a second oscillator right away, and I think it can go even deeper. I want to use the same set of wavetables, and in the matrix I want to set up the mod wheel just to scan through the wavetable positions. Also for oscillator A. B to the filter too. Now we're getting somewhere. Also want to use some of the filter drive to make the whole sound more impactful. Let's bring down the volume a bit. And also, I want to work on those envelopes, because right now it's a very basic sound. And I'm just tweaking the envelopes to my liking. For sure, I know though that I want to use an envelope on the filter as well. So I will set up a filter envelope. Let's go to the matrix and check. Yeah, this can be snappier for sure. Bit of release. Attack is alright. Let's map the velocity as well to the filter cutoff. This sounds good, I like it. Let's see if we can do something with the inbuilt effects. So I think here is a sweet spot of this particular sound playing that key. So I want to introduce some movement using the LFO, routing it to the gain here. Yeah, immediately gives some groove. Let's check if the timing is alright. Maybe a different timing will work better. There's too much conflict on the kick, so I'm going for a half here. Smoothing it as well. Sounds great, but it's way too strong. So I want to bring it down. A bit more subtle like this. This works great, I think. And also let's see what some chorus does. It sounds nice with a bit less depth. But just bringing it in a tiny bit, because in the bass I want to avoid conflicts with mono compatibility. Introducing stereo effects here is always a risky endeavor. See if we can create some more movement using LFO2. I will set it up in a similar way to LFO3. Rising shape. Let's check the filter variation. The filter drive I've been playing around with earlier. Let's maybe solo the bass for now, so we can more easily hear the subtle differences. And also the really deep bass is coming from oscillator B. So I want to check if it sounds nice. Just a tiny bit more movement when automating the volume of the second oscillator as well. And I think we're going somewhere with this sound. That would be a good idea to maybe check with an EQ in a second. And I'm feeling right now the oscillator A giving the whole sound a bit more space. It sounds good, but I want to reduce the volume maybe to around here. This sounds good for now. Let's work on the EQ. Same procedure as usual. I like to scan for sweet spots. So the very sub part, it's pretty strong already. I like this harmonic here, so I want to bring it out a bit. And some of the clicky attack part as well. The top end. Yeah, I think this EQ works nice because it's bringing out the harmonics that I like about the sound. So let's see how it sounds together. Pretty good so far. Alright, so now we have a basic bass and drum sketch running. I'm quite happy with it, but I want to elaborate on the bass with some effects, and I want to do it in a duplicate layer so that I have more control over how it sounds. What I mean by that is I'm planning to introduce some stereo reverb kind of effects, and I want to make sure that this does not interfere with the very low bass notes. So I'm setting up a second channel. I just copied it, and let's call it FX bass. All right. So let's solo all the basses, and like I said, I'm planning to do something stereo on here. So let me get rid of this EQ and just put a high pass in here for now. Great, so now they're just layered. And let's start out with some distortion. I like using the dynamic tube. Let's see if we can find a sweet spot. I'm just cycling through the modes to see what sound I like. The envelope is also a great feature because it tracks the incoming envelope and applies that to the distortion, so you can get a more dynamic sound out of it. Yeah, this sounds great. Subtle bit of distortion, it's nice to have. Let's introduce some delay. Already a great rhythm just with the dotted eighth. That's the default. But I'm bringing down the dry wet a bit. Just to be sure, I also high cut here again. And I really like this offset feature so that the right and the left side are delayed to different timings, which gives a kind of Haas effect, which makes everything sound super wide. I have to be a bit cautious with it because it can be too much really fast, but I like the way it sounds now. Gives a great rhythm, great syncopation to the bass. Let's check with the rest. Definitely an improvement. So let's see what else we can do. I like using the hybrid reverb. Let's see if we can find a nice room for this. And I'm just cycling through to see for a texture, to listen if I can find a texture that I like. I think this one is good, so I will use it. Bring down the dry wet a bit because it's too much. Then I want to tweak this as well, make it a bit smaller. something like this, and the algorithmic one, I can just blend it like this and it already sounds good. So this check with and without effects. It does a lot, immediately sounds better. I want to make the cutoff a bit smoother. Around here like this. Let's bring this down maybe a decibel. And this whole bus could use maybe a tiny boost around here. Great. But we are running into some conflicts now with the kick drum. So let's set up a sidechain right away. We'll put it after the EQ. Sidechaining to the kick. I'm considering setting up a kick group because later on I want to use another kick for high pass sections maybe. So it would be nice to have it in a group. That way the sidechaining setup will not be messed up. So I have one here, just updating it. And here now I can use the kick group as a sidechain. Perfect. Now it's just a matter of listening to which settings give me the right groove. Of course, this is way too strong. I think I will use peak mode for this. It's a bit more responsive, I feel. And I'm aiming for just the right punch, playing around with the release. Attack can be very short. I don't want to overdo it with the pumping effect. This goes a very long way. A super important step to making this sound nice. I just want to follow up with an EQ to get rid of the very lows. Way better integrated into the whole soundscape. I want to recheck the kick levels. Yeah, the level can definitely go up here. Now we have a nice groove going. I like this so far. So we are pretty fast. We have a solid bass and drum structure now. I think it is time to move on to some melodic elements. And then from that, I want to break out of the loopy production habit as fast as possible. But for now, I still want to gather elements that I can use, chord structures to build from. So yeah, this is the drum and bass structure onto the melodics. All right, so now that we have the very basic structure set up, let's create a new MIDI track. And I think I want to start by writing a pad sound just to have some texture, something sustained in the background. And let's use Wavetable for that. And key-wise, we are in F sharp, so I can already stretch out a bass like this with the fundamental. Amazing. Now let's scan for a nice wave first. And here, same to my approach on other elements. I really just want to play around, see what fits, and lay out a base, and then evolve from that until I'm happy with the sound. Already. I like that C sharp. Let's bring that up 1 octave. Very dramatic. I like it. And like for the other elements, set up a group right away. Bring down the volume. Great. And color-wise, all right, onto the actual sound design. So right off the bat, I like the saw kind of sound. So I'm thinking to stick with this. Maybe an octave down. Oh yeah, that's better immediately. Let's introduce some unison. Not too much. Just subtle for some movement, stereo image. Great, sounds good. As it will be played sustained, I want to bring up the sustain. So that when the new pattern begins, there's no drop in volume. Let's maybe bring in a second oscillator. Slightly. I like it. I want to shape the sound a bit more using an EQ. Cutting away from those low notes because this is more about the mid-range. We don't need this almost bass interfering kind of frequency. Kind of abrasive a bit here, sometimes, especially when it's loud. So I'm scooping that out. Good for now. Maybe some delay would be great to introduce more space. Again, the default dotted eighth sounds amazing. I'm using my good old trick for some additional stereo separation. Loud maybe, or like this. Let's cut the lows, and I think the shimmer it's nice to have some of that shimmer in the delay signal as well, so I'm trying to keep that in. Already adds so much if you compare only the drums and the bass together. It's solid, it's nice, but now we have a really floating, moving kind of bass underneath everything. So I like where this is going. Time to add another element, and then also I want to start thinking about a structure and some chord progression to break out of the loop stage. But for now, let's introduce another sound. Alright, since we have a pretty good melodic foundation now with the pad, I think it's time for a more in-your-face, aggressive kind of sound. So I want to create a new MIDI and build a typical for melodic techno ratcheting kind of sound. So let's load up another instance of Serum and start to work. So I will need a MIDI just to have something playing to actually do some sound design. Let's go. Alright, I'm just putting in some notes for now because I want to focus on sound design first, and then I think it goes hand in hand with the syncopation later down the line anyways, so this is really just to have something to play with. Alright, starting again from scratch, so let's go and look for some wavetables to work with. And let's immediately load up two oscillators, because for a sound like this I want one complex waveform and one more simpler. So this would be a simple one, and let's check for something more complex. This one I usually like, so right away I want to set up an FM from B. Now we're already getting that metallic, abrasive kind of sound, and this should be a sound playing very plucky or short. So let's work on the envelope as well. And envelope 1 is always routed per default to the amp. So we get a nice and snappy sound. Great. So a little bit high. Yeah, it sounds way better pitched down like this. Brings out the FM harmonics in a nice way, but I think it can be grittier. So let's look at some noise. Let me just solo that. It's very quiet. I like this plain, more kind of typical white noise sound, so let's route everything to the filter. The level can go down again. Not sure yet if I want to use only the carrier or both of them. I'll leave it on for now, but that's something to double check in a minute. Let's go for a steeper filter this time. We had a pretty soft filter on the bass. And we need some of that envelope on the filter so that the sound actually shimmers through. Great. I do think we need some help on the volume here. Compared to the pad, it's pretty quiet. And I don't want to mess with that volume for now. So I'm just setting up an EQ because I want to low cut the sound anyways, boosting the volume a bit. Great. Let's focus on the melodics for now a bit, so we can hear it more clear. And this sound is too dry for sure, so let's introduce some effects. Let's see, distortion. And here I'm just playing around to see which distortion model. Oh, this is nice. I think I like this one. Just trying to see which distortion sounds unique and interesting for this sound. It's a bit much too, so I'm gonna ease back a bit on the dry and wet. Sounds good. Let's maybe bring in a compressor for the dynamics. Increasing the attack so that initial transient cuts through in a nice way. Not doing too much, just a subtle detail. So designing this sound, I'm thinking more of something that plays not too often, but when it hits, it should be right in your face. So I really want to empathize using an effects chain. Maybe later down the line, some Ableton effects as well. Let's scan for some... Oh, nice. Scan for some sweet spots here. This brings up some of the harmonics in a nice way, so I think I will keep it. And the high band is pretty good as it is. I just want to bump it up a tiny notch. Let's get some delay in. Yeah, and here I'm just playing the values to get a nice bouncing quality out of this. And let's touch it up with some reverb. Alright, we are getting somewhere. Now let's focus a bit more on the MIDI again, since we have something to work with. I think I wanted to not play too often, so let's extend that MIDI. Right around here sounds good to me, and then maybe a follow-up later. Doing like this, doing the ratcheting. This is pretty good already. This note sounds better. It creates a bit more rhythm if it's offset to the right versus what I had before. I like this sound, I like where it's going. Let's do some editing here as First of all, also let me just rename it to Ratchet. Perfect. And I'm gonna bring up my hybrid reverb again, and let's just see. Since we already do have a reverb in the patch, I'm looking more at something to connect those two parts with, because it does sound a bit awkward if it's quiet for a long time and then the section happens. But first of all, I want to find a nice room I want to work with. Sounds good. Now I want to automate that, and you'll understand what I meant earlier when you hear how this sounds. It's a bit hard to hear, but it kind of like sucks into that second part. And I want to get the angle, so to speak, just right. And let me actually, first of all, put this before the EQ. And I'm gonna use the OTT preset just to... Yeah, that's too much, obviously. But this multiband compressor brings up the quiet parts really, really over the top. That's why it's called OTT. But I want to use it to make that reverb glide a bit more audible. If you check without the OTT, it's barely noticeable, especially if everything is playing. But like this. Nice. We get some good movement out of the sound. And the fundamental, I think the EQ is alright like this. Let's go back into the patch for a second and tweak some more. The noise is a bit too quiet. I want to try linking it to the envelope 1 so that the noise actually decreases with the envelope. Sounds good. Just to empathize that plucky transient quality the sound has. Oh yeah, that's where it's at. I like this sound. So now we have a melodic structure consisting of a pad, the ratcheting sound, and all together. And I think this needs to be a bit louder. Somewhere around here for now. All of this I will double check at a later point anyways, when it comes more to editing the groups and mixing. Also something I want to set up now is another sidechain on the melodic bus, because we do have some interference with the kick here. First of all from the pad, of course, which is sustained all the time, but also this hits at the same time here with the kick, and it is a pretty forward sound, so it wouldn't hurt to take care of that. So let me load up a compressor onto here. Yes, perfect. And use that kick group from earlier. hear the pump. I want to go for something subtle. If I make the release too long, it's kind of swallowing the sounds. So I'm starting from a long release and I'm just easing back until I find it hits right. It's also helpful to exaggerate the movements on the threshold, for example, just to see if the settings sound right from attack and release, and then just ease back a bit. Sounds great. I love it. Time for another element. And I will keep adding melodic elements until I think we have enough to work with to stretch out to arrangement. Yeah, so time for a new element. Alright, it is time to write a lead for this track, and for this I want to use Serum again, and obviously the lead is a very central element, so let's start writing another patch from scratch and start with a potential MIDI. I'm going to set it the same length as the ratcheting sound, because now we have a great opportunity to write a call-and response melody to this. So we have melody playing around the first section here, which would be the call, and then the response is that ratcheting sound. And also it's a great sound to do this with because it kind of breaks up and it's very in your face. So we can write an equally powerful melody lead. So start with our fundamental again. And I like to come up with at least some form of usable MIDI right away. That helps a lot when writing, I feel. We just turn on a filter here so it doesn't sound too harsh. And here again, I'm just playing around with the groove. I think this is going somewhere. Let me get rid of those for now, because what I have now, it's pretty nice. It's a polyrhythmic kind of pattern with the note length being 3, so it repeats on 1.4 instead of 2. Maybe we can do something interesting with that. I like this. We have the C sharp as well in the pad, and we create a bit of tension with that D up front here. Let's try and put those down an octave. Oh, that sounds good. Another poly note. What I noticed now when playing around is that this big jump here in octaves made it sound a bit more special and a bit more in-your-face, catchier. So I think I will settle for this and work on the patch a bit more. Let's load up some wavetables. I like this one. Oh, it sounds great when I use the saw kind of sound, and I have it on a lower octave. Gives that really grunchy, gritty kind of bass. Then on top we have a higher oscillator. Maybe let's put this to just a regular saw. Playing around a bit with unison. Try to introduce some noise. I'll use the bright white again. Just tweaking it to get the right amount of dirt, so to speak. Make it a bit more, crunchy and aggressive. Alright, let's take a look at some of the effects we have. I'll use a bit of distortion again. Just because it's an upfront sound in my opinion as well. Some phasing for the stereo image and texture. And this sounds a bit too much. I want to maybe automate this or assign it to an LFO later. Let's see. Let's just bring a chorus as well. And I'm thinking to do the same here. Let's head over to the matrix at this point. Let me solo the melodies again. And let's just patch up some LFO modulation. So we could go for the effects I've mentioned. Just phaser and chorus. To create a bit more variation, I want to use this without sync, so that it's just a free running LFO. Now you can see it's affecting those dry wet mixes just ever so slightly to spice up the sound. And also we could use some modulation on the filter cutoff. Let's head back to the matrix. Nice call and response with the ratcheting sound, I like it. Let's maybe make some more use of that LFO2. What do you have? Maybe it's some of the oscillators. Some slight detune. It's easy to overdo it here. This really should just be subtle in my opinion. I like it pretty much so far. So let's work on some effects here and actually give it a name, lead. Just looking for a reverb now that I like. And I'm just scanning the presets. That sounds good enough. Let's tweak it maybe. Pretty happy with that. So some delay would be nice as well. Turning down the dry wet. And I want to use some distortion. Wow, this is loud. Let me bring that down a couple of decibels. This makes it really gritty, I like it. I'm gonna turn up the dynamics and reduce the dry wet, maybe even the drive a bit. Good, we're getting somewhere. I want to load up a glue compressor. To shape the dynamics a bit. And really squeeze that sound. Letting some of the transients through. Afterwards as well. Yeah, this is getting somewhere. I just want to try an OTT on here to really squeeze that sound, see what it does. Does help the low end a bit. I think I will keep it on. But we definitely need a sidechain compressor to that kick group. On top of the group one, because this is always playing on the one of the drums, so tend to make some space. Again, same procedure. Adjusting values with a strong setting to eventually ease out of the threshold. And also the ratio, a tiny bit. Now let's bring an EQ in. All this editing messed with our low end, so it's gonna have to be cut. But I still want to keep that fundamental. Maybe boost the low frequencies. Like this. Because we have a lot of stereo going on, I'm just gonna double check with the utility, put the bass in mono. Checking on the volume as well. It sounds good, I like it. Alright, we are doing quite some progress. Let me think what else we need. I think it is time to kind of figure out a chord and progression structure. And then I'm thinking to introduce one or two elements to just bridge the gap between those parts. Because when you have a melodic progression, usually the way you would write it is not to have it play all the time. Of course, it will be like the sound will be teased and the progression evolves at some point. And it's always great to have effect or other synth sound to ease in and out of those parts. So I would say the focus main in-your-face elements we already have, but we still need something to make the connection for later down the line. But for now, first I want to work on the progression. So that's up next. All right, so time to flesh out this idea into a proper chord progression. And I would like to start with the pad for this. So first of all, let's extend everything we have. Drums, go in all those groups, duplicate, drag, just like this. Same for the bass and the pad. Let's save this maybe here and use this as a new MIDI. And we'll just double the length and jam to come up with a chord progression. Okay, so we have the fundamental F sharp. Let's see where we can take this. And open up the filter a bit so it's easier to hear. I like that E. Ever since earlier, actually, having an E in there sounded pretty good at times, but I'm not sure if it's the right thing for the progression at this point. And I'm basically just... I think the E would be nice to resolve with. So we have F sharp. Let me try to figure out what chord to play in between here. This sounds nice. Just doing the octaves again, and then here. I think we're on to something here. Let's put, yeah, with the B. Right, maybe one octave. So this gives us some opportunity to jump back on that C sharp here. Oh, this is actually nice. I just copied that here, but I like the way it sounds. Let's check with the filter. Beautiful. All right. How can we flesh this out with the other elements now? For sure, we need some kind of bassline progression too. So I want to just drag this to the left and create a new MIDI here that actually follows that progression. So we had F sharp, A, E. Going in here, same length. I'll just duplicate that. Should work. Yeah, without a problem, that's nice. Okay, I need to copy this down here. Other elements do we have? The ratcheting definitely needs to be adjusted as well. I also need to copy over that automation in here. So let's double the length here as well. Duplicate, and it was A to E. Sounding pretty good. Of course, now it doesn't really work well. I want to do a kind of ratcheting here, and I'm gonna just fill it in by hand, because also it's nice to not be always perfectly syncopated. Makes it sound more lively and organic. So let's check this. That typical melodic techno ratcheting kind of sound. Let me increase step by step the velocity here. Maybe. So right now it's just playing around with the velocity mapping to kind of not have to them too strong, just ease it in a tiny bit. I think it works well, and probably time to also do another MIDI for the lead, because that's also changing keys. So let's see what we can do here. Alright, now so to complete the progression, we also have to work on the lead. Since this melody needs to follow the progression in a way. Let me copy it over here. Yeah, this last one doesn't work. So let's see what we can do here. Yeah, it will work to resolve on the B here, so I think I will just keep it like that. And also I'm thinking of some more melodic elements. I want something to increase the tension during the track, and I think it should be a fast-paced element. So something like an ARP maybe, or like a quick 16th note. Let's just create a wavetable for that. So new, and let's make it an ARP. And I will just copy the MIDI from the pad over. All right, that should work. Now we need to actually arpeggiate it. So let's go to the MIDI effects arpeggiator, and I'm gonna play around a bit with the rates and everything till I find sound that I like. Let's bring the drums in for that. Maybe the bass. I'll leave the other melodics off for now, just so I can hear it better. I like the soft sound of the triangle wave here. I like this setting on the ARP. Let's bring in a second oscillator because the first one does drown a bit, so a saw wave will help to fill up those harmonics. When doing sound design, it's also helpful to think of it in a way that, and it's actually quite good representation here, a sine wave will be the most simple basic waveform, saw wave the most complex, not really. White noise would be, but so all of these waveforms have different amounts of harmonics, and I'm choosing the saw wave just because it's a denser one. So saw wave in general has the densest or the most amount of harmonics. Square wave is kind of in between, and then we have the really basic triangle and sine wave. Just a quick tangent on that. So let's play this. And I want to do a lot of the sound design here through effects. So let's pull up a hybrid reverb and check for some sound. Maybe a spring. I really love the default awesome stereo spring. It does sound awesome. It's quite long, so I'm shortening the size and the decay. For a different algorithm here. And also there's a technique I like to use similar to what I explained earlier when fading sounds and down to find the sweet spot. I like to do it the same way with the dry wet amount. So of course, obviously 100% wet, too wet, too dry. So just really listening, playing playing around until I find a setting I like. Like this, it's pretty good. So let's bring in some delay. Gives us a great stereo image. Sticking to the theme here with the dotted eighth. For some vinyl distortion this time, without the crackles and pops. I'm just interested in the actual distortion. And it can be quite strong, so I'm easing down on the amount here. Just an ever so subtle touch to make it a bit more interesting. So I want to add an EQ as well. Cut out those low frequencies here. And empathize that glittery part. Get it to match with the other elements. Okay, this is good. So, right, what do we have? We have a proper progression, all those melodic elements. The ARP isn't too fancy. So I still want to add a 16th note to have an element to increase tension towards a potential break or drop later down the production. So let's use a serum for that. And this really should just be an element to increase the tension. So I'm going to do something similar like I did in the beginning with the hi-hat. Can do a really short pattern, and this should just increase the velocity throughout the sound playing. And of course, I need to route this to maybe the filter or the envelope. And I want to do a bit more sound design on here as well, so that it's not just a basic saw. So let's dive into that. Alright, so we have a basic structure for the sound I'm looking for. It's time to do some sound design, but since we have a bunch of complex sounds in this track already, I will go a bit easy. This will not be too fancy of a sound. It's really got a purpose, and we'll try to keep it simple. So play this sound and see what we can get out of it. Definitely needs a short tack, more kind of a pluck. Also both oscillators to the filter, and I'm going to use a noise later, so activating that as well. And I want it really plucky. Plucky and short. Sounds good so far. Maybe a bit of stereo. Detune just to have a bit of stereo field straight from the oscillators. Keeping the modulation from the velocity quite low. It should really be subtle, but I want to route the envelope to the filter as well. Now it's getting somewhere, and that velocity is really nicely stacking on top of that. I really like that. Let's maybe also route this to the amp, if I can find it here. Quite happy with that. Let's look at some effects to use on here. So we have again some low frequency rumble. I'm gonna take care of that with an EQ. And I want to use an auto pan to make the sound kind of swirl around in the stereo image. And since this is more kind of a supporting element, you get away with a lot more stereo sounds, something to make the texture more interesting, because this is not so important that it has to sit perfectly mono compatible in the mix. This is really just an additional element. So I like using auto pan for this. It kind of moves around your head. This will pair great with a reverb. Gonna go for the hybrid reverb again. And let's use that spring again. Oh, it sounds so good. And the short setting gives it a really anxious, anticipating kind of tone, which is what I'm aiming for, because this element should be, the purpose of this element should be to create tension. So that's exactly what I'm aiming for. Adjusting the blend. Sounds good for now. So now we are at a stage where we have a big loop playing. It's really time to break out of that loop session. And I'm thinking, since we have a lot of elements playing, this would be a nice part of the track to transition into a break. And I kind of want to arrange to the right outwards. And I am thinking that this could use maybe another element, some kind of counter melody to kind of call in response with the ARP and the fast one, the 16th one we just made. Let's also call it like that. Let me set up everything for that and kind of do a mini arrangement maybe. So that way it's easier to understand what I mean. So I'm taking all of the melodic elements, putting them to the right. And I will also take the bass, this. And now we basically have this drum part playing right here. Let me collapse that. And this is the basic groove we had before. Let me put those original MIDIs here for now. For now. And I feel this is not the right moment to bring this in, so let's put that a bit to the right. At least we have the structure laid out, so now it's easy to shift it around. And then there there would be a part where the progression breaks up, and then that could lead into a break, I'm thinking. And this would also be a good time to introduce that high-passed kick I was thinking about earlier. Before I duplicate the kick and do that, I want to check something that's been bugging me for a while now, because the kick and bassline interaction, I think, could be improved by shortening the kick, actually. It's too short, obviously. I'm just trying to find a sweet spot. Like this. It's just a change I wanted to make quick before duplicating the kick now and setting up a high-passed kick. And I typically do it like this, just duplicate it. So you have 2 kick lanes, and then that's why I have the kick group for sidechaining. And on here I can just put EQ. I like doing it like this because if you automate the on-off of an EQ, sometimes there's a click happening when rendering. Sometimes it doesn't happen. Doing it like this just ensures that you're on the safe side. Yeah, quick and simple. Maybe cutting a bit of the highs as well. So let's check this section. Of course, shouldn't loop. Amazing. I like this part, and I can really imagine this breaking up into a full-blown break. And I'm thinking of writing a counter melody, so probably the final melodic element. I want to have one more serum, and is it a counter melody? I'll call it break melody for now. All right, on to another melodic element. We have plenty of melodies in this track, so let's dive into sound design here, I would say.